Hello, in this video I'm going to explain the 4 different ways to calculate slope. So first of all, before we calculate slope, I just want to give you a glimpse of or an idea of what slope is. So slope is pretty much the steepness of a line, and when you calculate slope, you're calculating a ratio that is just used as a measure of steepness. A slope can also be considered as a positive slope if a line goes up when you graph it, or if a relationship increases over time. It could also be considered as a negative slope if the opposite happens, where when you graph it, the line is going down from left to right, or also in a real world when a relationship is decreasing over time. There is a slope of 0, and that is when you have a flat line when you graph it. And as far as real world, slope of 0 means that there's no change over time. Nothing is changing. And then there's the undefined slope, which is a vertical line when you graph it. And as far as real world, it just honestly means like that you cannot define it. Like there's no such thing that cannot exist in real world. Okay? All right. So you can be given several representations in math. You could be given a graph, you could be given a table, you could be given 2 points, you could be given equations, and you can also even be given verbal descriptions, so like word problems, but I'll make another video on that. In this one, I'm just going to talk about how to find slope abstractly. So in a graph, we are looking at identifying how a graph changes in steepness, looking at the ratio of rise over run. Okay, so whatever your rise is, you put it on top. Whatever your run is, you put it on the bottom. And it creates a little fraction that sometimes looks like a whole number if you divide the top by the bottom. So for example, if you have, let's say you have 2 right here, and then you have 4, so that would be a 2 over 4. That, if you simplify, becomes 1 over 2. Okay, so that will be a way to calculate slope. All right, another example will be if you're given a table. So in a table, you are going to look for it as the change of y over the change of x. Meaning you're going to look at 2 points in the graph, on the table, sorry, and you're going to calculate the change of the y. The little triangle means change, and the change of the x. Okay, so if I put random numbers here, let's say -1, 3, 5, and 8. Okay, the 3 and the 8 changed by adding 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. And the -1 changed to a 5 by adding 6. You can either sketch a line, to help yourself visualize the numbers. So -1 is right here. 5 is somewhere over here. So from -1 to 5, you moved 6 spaces. And then you can pretty much do the same with the 3 and the 8. Okay, so once you calculate the change in y and change of x, you write it as a fraction, as a ratio. So 5 goes on top because that's your change of y. And the 6 goes on the bottom because that's your change of x. And that's it. That is your slope. All right, so then the other part is calculating when you have 2 points. So let's say we have just, again, random numbers. 3, 1, -5, 6. We are going to use the slope formula here. So this slope formula is in your formula chart as we have seen it in the class. You will have this formula chart during STAR to remind you of what the formula is to calculate slope. But again, you gotta know when to use it. So this just helps you find slope. Okay, so then you grab your y values and you subtract them, y2 minus y1, so 6 minus 1, over x2 minus x1. So x2 meaning the second x value minus the first x value. You can type this in your calculator and press enter and get an answer, or you can just do this in your mind. 6 minus 1, that becomes 5. 5 over -8. Okay, so that is your slope for the 2 points. All right, for equations, you have to ask yourself, like, well, first of all, what form is it? So like if it's in y equals mx plus b, for example, y equals 3x plus 5, the m right here, that's your slope. Okay, if you have the point slope form and it looks really, I guess, complicated because it's really long, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you identify where the slope is. So the slope is technically just that number right there, replacing the m. Okay, and then the standard form, this one, you cannot identify the slope just by looking at it. You can't, but you can rewrite it in order to identify it. So if we rewrite it, we would prefer to write it as slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So you will have to move the x to the right side. So minus 8x, whatever that number is, you subtract it or add it to cancel it. And then you're left with the coefficient of y and y. And then these other two are technically, like I said, two parts that are not like terms. So then you write it next to each other. But if we're going to write it as mx plus b, x term goes first. So whatever you did to the left side, you are going to write it first on the right side, and then whatever your c value is, put it at the end. Okay, so to finalize this, you're going to divide and get rid of the coefficient of the y by dividing by whatever that number is. So that kind of cancels that y, and you're left with y equals negative a x over b plus c. And this is mx plus b technically, so your slope will be right here. This will be your slope. Whatever your a is, the opposite version of that, divided by your b value. Okay. I hope this video helps kind of give you an idea of, again, how slope could be calculated in 4 different ways.